Welcome back to Corbin AI, where I'm showing you daily how to start leveraging artificial intelligence in your personal and your business life. And you clicked on today's video as I'm going to be discussing the major fundamental pieces of software you need to have in order to build out an artificial intelligence integrated SaaS. Now, I'm going to break down every single software you would use in the context of building out a SaaS. You're going to find out, why I would use a specific software and why you would not use a specific software. You're going to learn everything around it, and we're going to dive into that in today's video. So let's go ahead and jump in here. We're starting off with Firebase. This is a major backend here. But before I continue any further here, if you have zero to little coding experience, I encourage you to check out this video right here. It gives you a 6-month roadmap to even entertain the thought of coding out an entire SaaS, starting with node code tools to get you comfortable with the idea of automation, data passing, software, and stuff of this nature. But in this specific video, I am more tailoring this content to the third phase I talk about in that video, where now we want to start building out this SaaS, but we want to know the best tools to use, why to use them, and fundamental stuff you should be aware of before even entertaining the idea of building out an AI SaaS. So without further ado, let's go and begin here. I wanted to, have this as the, nice little intro screen just because they have a cool little GIF here. But let's go to jump over to our whiteboard here and discuss basically the 3 major things that you need to know when building out a software as a service. Now, before we show these 3 major things, another thing I want to point out here is you don't need any formal type of education. What I mean by that is you don't need to go to college for a 4-year degree to learn how to program. You don't need to take a course online to learn how to program. If I'm going to be completely transparent with you, honestly, it might actually be counterintuitive to do stuff of that nature because a lot of the stuff they teach in school, a lot of the stuff they would teach in a programming course is actually not pragmatic information that you would need in order to build out a SaaS. A lot of stuff is theoretical. If you're familiar with the education system, you know what I'm talking about. They will teach you theory, but not actual practical stuff that you care about when you actually want to implement it. Therefore, what I encourage you to do is rather than take that course that maybe teaches you how to print hello world, just dive into it. Learn how to do this in the sense of actual pragmatic use case and actual learning real stuff that's going to be able to apply to the SaaS you're building out. And I'm going to teach you a way to learn this because obviously no one can just jump into Visual Code Studio and just start doing something. But I'm going to show you how to actually learn this from the ground up and the way that is most optimized for building out a SaaS. But without further ado, here are the 3 major things you need to understand when building out a SaaS of this nature. So, the big 3. The first of these big 3 in this branch is going to go ahead and be the AI. So AI is going to be general here. And what I mean by AI, when I say AI, we're going to go ahead and break this down to 2 major things. It's going to be ChatGPT and it's going to be OpenAI. So obviously ChatGPT is a subsidiary of OpenAI, but OpenAI's API is the actual artificial intelligence we'll use in the SaaS we're building out. But ChatGPT is used in the context of this is going to be your teacher now. This is your expert. This is the YouTube video. This is how you learn how to do this in a pragmatic sense. And I'm going to explain a little bit more on really how to how to approach this conversation, how to get on this topic when talking to ChatGPT. But the first major branch you need to understand is going to be AI. The second major branch here is going to be the actual application itself. So what this encompasses is going to be your back end and your front end. So when I say back end and front end, what I mean by this is right now on this website, it looks nice. It's a nice little whiteboard. That's my front end. That's what I visually see as a user. This little share button up here, this little icon. This is my front end. The back end is the way that everything gets passed for data. So when I hit share, what's occurring there is that they're doing some type of cloud function where that incurs some type of function in the back end, or quote unquote, where the importance of the back end is that you can achieve processes without it being on your local machine. And when I mean local machine, I mean just your physical laptop, physical computer, physical phone. Without storing it on the data on your actual phone, we're storing it in the cloud. So that's going to be the second major thing with building out a SaaS. It's going to be your back end and your front end. The last major thing that you need to understand when building out a SaaS is tools, or let me go ahead and change the color here so it looks cooler. It's going to be tools that we are going to use in order to, one, expedite processes, but also overall make our SaaS more effective for scaling, for handling data in a certain way. So one big tool that we're going to be talking about in this video is going to be Zapier. So if you know this channel, I'm beating a dead horse here, but Zapier is amazing, even in the context of building out a SaaS from straight raw code. You're still going to use Zapier, that's a whole nother conversation to be had of why that is such a powerful company. But for now, we have broken this down into three major branches here. As I said before, if you are not familiar with code at all, I encourage you to check out the 6 month roadmap to get to this point. But if you know a little bit about code, you understand how automations work and how software works intuitively, let's go and jump into every single one of these branches, what you need to know about these branches, and how you should approach building out a SaaS. So the first branch we're going to approach today is going to be ChatGPT and OpenAI's API. So in the context of ChatGPT, here's what you need to understand. Here's what you need to know. Custom instructions is extremely important. You might be saying to yourself, what is custom instructions? Custom instructions is when you go to settings and you click custom instructions. And what it does is it allows you to proctor ChatGPT for a very specific use case, therefore allowing for more effective outputs when communicating with it. Now, if you want to learn more about that, I'll go ahead and make sure I link that up there as well. So maybe there's going to be a lot of videos linked up there, as this video is kind of tying a bow on all of the content we've done on this channel. But custom instructions, extremely important. This is where you're going to identify the type of machine you're using. Are you using macOS? Are you using Windows? Are you using React as your front end? Or using Firebase? You're going to lay out everything. You're going to lay out your idea. Custom instructions is fundamental. It is very important in this process. The second thing is you're going to use plugins. What kind of plugins you're going to use in this context? We're going to be using plugins like WebPilot, plugins like Ask Your Code, plugins like Stack Overflow Plus. This is going to allow you to access the internet. This is going to allow you to access up-to-date information when it comes to coding. And on top of that, plugins like Ask Your Code is going to allow you to access the code you're actually working on in a GitHub directory. So if some of that didn't make sense to you, GitHub directory, think of it as your code that's on your machine, but it's in the cloud now. Therefore, when we access it through ChatGPT, we can get direct files and naming of those files. So that is why stage one here, which is super important, is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is extremely important. The way I want you to look at ChatGPT and the way you want you to talk to ChatGPT is if it is that professor that you paid $100,000 a year for at that university, but now you have to go to office hours and actually ask pragmatic questions rather than let's do a theoretical code project for building out tic-tac-toe. No, I want to learn how to create a database where when a user signs up, it automatically inputs values based off the user's information, based off, okay, let's build out a flow where we build out the entire directory in Firestore where when the user signs up, we automatically have their access token, we automatically have their email, we automatically have like real pragmatic stuff. So all of that and all that education comes through ChatGPT. Now, to be transparent here, you can go to subscribe, as once we're done building out our SaaS, because right now we're in the production stage and we're about to launch, we're going to do a full-blown, auditory type video where you can actually see us build out a whole new idea and showcase everything I'm showing here. So you can go ahead and make sure you subscribe and wait for that. That's going to be a big one here. I really plan on going, super, super out for that. I mean, I plan on taking it to the next level for that. That's going to be a really in-depth series. I want to basically go from local all the way to production, show that out. But ChatGPT, this is fundamental. And if you don't even know how to talk to ChatGPT yet, don't jump in maybe that heavy yet. I encourage you to maybe check out videos here or check out videos elsewhere and learn how to talk to ChatGPT. It's super fundamental in this process. So the next thing is going to be OpenAI's API. So OpenAI's API in this context is what's going to allow us to access artificial intelligence in the context of our application we're building out, which is, basically the most important part of any artificial intelligence integrated SaaS, as we're going to be able to use OpenAI's API in order to achieve, true artificial intelligence. So I'll give you some quick pointers here for you to understand when entertaining OpenAI's API. One, the documentation is amazing. It's really organized and really good. Two, if you don't understand anything that's occurring here, that's where ChatGPT comes into play. Grab the link, put it into a ChatGPT chat, explain to me what choices mean, explain to me what created mean, explain to me what, coming down here, what does frequency penalty mean, and explain it to me as if I was 10 years old. So there's ways to talk to ChatGPT to really understand more complex documentation when it comes to this certain environment. So knowing this, keep in mind is that as a rule of thumb, 3.5, 16K, 3.5 in general, that's going to be a cheaper model in the context of how much it's going to cost you. GPT-4 is going to be a more expensive model. It's more comprehensive. It's able to give you better and more effective outputs. So your question might be at that point, why don't I always use a 4 model? you want to use the 3.5 model for kind of the grunt work. You want to use the 3.5 model in the context that you want to take a ton of data, compress it, then give it to a ChatGPT 4 model in order to interpret the data at a more compressed stage. And what I mean by that is, let's say we are dealing with a 30-page legal document and you're building out a SaaS for legal firms, where maybe the end point of that SaaS is you're going to be able to compress that entire legal document, or grab all the data associated with that legal document, compress it to find possible issues for your client, and then have ChatGPT interpret those possible issues. So 3.5 and 4 actually work hand in hand. I've done a ton of videos on that. There's one video. Oh yeah, it's like me like this. It's part of this playlist. Corbin AI talks, talks about business, not just talks. But go and click that one. That one really tells you the fundamental importance of choosing the right model in the context of code and OpenAI. It's just me going like this, 3.5, GPT-4, and similar video of this style. So that is going to be kind of finishing off the AI branch here. And let's go and jump into the backend branch here. So the backend, you have two major choices really. It's going to either be Firebase or AWS in the context of building a web application. I'll be honest with you, choose whatever you're most comfortable with. What I've noticed in the industry is that a lot of people lean towards AWS, but I think that's kind of a cognitive bias because of the fact that maybe when they were developing in college or within the business they're working at, they have to become more accustomed to AWS because the business uses AWS, right? So inherently, you're going to be more biased towards using AWS because of the fact that, for example, Zapier uses AWS. So that's probably a cognitive bias. And honestly, I have a bias. We've been using Firebase, so I'm going to say use Firebase. Other people are going to say use AWS. It's really just weigh it out. Honestly, you can go down to pricing to see whatever you're most comfortable with. Personally, when I build out that entire series, I'm gonna be using Firebase. Why? Because I just liked it better. I personally just like Google's UI better. There's reasons to it. The pricing works for what we're trying to do. So backend wise, that is going to be where you store a lot of your user data. That's going to be where you're able to cloud functions that essentially allows it so when a user clicks something and then exits out the browser, it can still incur in the backend. You don't have to worry about anything of that nature. So when it comes to actually using, I can't speak too much on AWS. I'm not experienced in AWS, so I'm only speaking on behalf of Firebase, at least from Firebase and what I've been seeing. They are very, very generous when it comes to pricing. And a lot of times in the development phase and even early on, probably in production, you're not even going to be getting charged anything at all. As you see here, you're able to do a ton of actions with no cost associated with it. And the reason they do that is just so if you do blow up and you do have a scalable business, they've locked in a SaaS, and SaaSes are 90% profit. So they already know you're going to be pretty healthy in the market. From here, though, just to give a little bit of perspective here, I did a video here where it was titled Why Most SaaSes Are 90% Profit. And I dive into a micro niche example of the SaaS we're building out. And just to give you perspective, the specific use case that we were dealing with was storing users' data for their thumbnails, their titles, and description. And at first, we were diverse to this because we thought that maybe if we stored the user's data when it came to their catalog, it would actually cost us more than just doing more API calls to YouTube's API. But what we realized actually was quite the opposite. We can increase the user's experience by storing the data because then they will load their videos faster. But also on top of that, for us to store up 1 gig of the metadata that it took us to store one video. This might sound a little confusing, but just put it this way. Basically, for us to store 1 gigabyte worth of users' catalog, users' data in the context of videos of their channel, we could store up to 8.5 million videos for only 1 gigabyte. Now, to be clear, this isn't like the actual video file or the image file. This is like links to the image file, the title. So we're talking about kilobytes because we're just dealing with text. Knowing that, if it only cost us, as you see here, 1 gig for 8 million videos, and here's what gets crazy. Okay, let's move it up to, come on, 10 gigs. Okay, so now 10 times 8, 80 million videos could be stored. It's going to cost us some money, but only $1.62 a month. So knowing that, choose your backend that you're most comfortable with. That kind of gives you a good idea there. Now you must choose a front end, and the front end is how we engage with a website as a user or with an app. We personally use React. We find React is just been really good for us in the sense of creating really, really good looking UI and the platform is, backed by Meta, a huge company. You're able to get a bunch of resources when it comes to React. This is a more advertised product in the sense of more people do education on this topic. On top of that, we've really had no issues with React when it comes to what we're trying to achieve. I mean, they have like a bunch of stuff about it. You can even look using ChatGPT could really help you in the direction of React. Now, there might be other front ends that you might want to use. Go ahead and leave them down in the comments below and kind of comparatively do it. As I said before, I'm going to be inherently biased when it comes to using React just because of the fact that's what we've been using and we've been comfortable with. So knowing that, that kind of covers the back and the front end of what you'll use here. So the front end, you'll have some server-side script in the sense of, maybe if you click a button, you don't have to send as a Cloud Function. It could be a local event. But finally, we get to the last part here, which is going to be your tools. So your tools here is, I'm just going to go over one in today's video, but it's going to be Zapier is going to be a big one. The reason Zapier is going to be a big one, and I've made a video on this before, is because of the fact that when you're building out this application or this software, there's going to be certain things that you don't necessarily, one, want to program, and two, really need to program. So what I mean by that is, let me just give you a really niche example, but a very practical example. So a lot of times when you sign up for a platform, not sign up, but yeah, when you log in, you give your email, you'll get a welcome email, right? So it's like, I'm signing up for XYZ SaaS, and I'll get a nice little welcome email saying, welcome to the platform. You'll get in your inbox and stuff of this nature. So in theory, to achieve this welcome email, you could code out a specific file for the use case of sending an email, and then maybe you have to entertain some type of API for Gmail or whatever your major email server provider is. But instead of going through the hassle of dealing with, basically putting more burden on your SaaS, because at the end of the day, that email is important, but it isn't the end-all value point of what you're trying to provide the user. We're going to use Zapier. And we're going to use Zapier in the context of this. We're going to set up a Zap where the pure point is that we are basically putting a webhook in our application where this webhook, we send a data point, and the data point we send is just going to be the user's email. And your next question might be, okay, so we built out this Zap. How do we conversate with this data point? Well, you could just do something as simple as this. Set up a mailing system like MailChimp. And MailChimp's great because they give you access to a ton of their API. But essentially, the user, we receive data point, we receive the email because it's sent as a webhook. That's what triggers the event. Then we go to MailChimp, and then MailChimp sends the email on your behalf, and everyone's happy. So this is just a micro niche example of why you'd use Zapier alternatively to coding out an entire file. There's a ton of other stuff of why using Zapier is better, but in the sense of this, simply sending a webhook with some very specific data points like email can be very fundamental in really speeding the process of building out a SaaS, but also operationally for you to visualize data usage, as data usage can be a little bit more ambiguous when dealing with Cloud Functions and building out actual software processes. But with this, at least you get the some type of easier read UI-wise data points when it comes to Zapier sending a webhook. As we know with Zapier, you can just kind of see through your history and see, oh, this many webhooks were sent out, this is how much data was being sent out, and stuff like this. So that covers it. That is going to be your three major points that you have to worry about before approaching the idea of building out a SaaS. It may seem like a lot, but I would want to say the strongest thing I want to send home here from this video is how fundamental ChatGPT is in this process. As a lot of stuff in the educational context, which I try to stray away from. Like when we produce videos here, I have full intention of providing you just value. I'm not here to give you fluff. I'm not here to, make a trendy video just because I think it's going to get more views. Any video I've made here on this channel genuinely you're going to leave with some type of education that you've gained from that video. So knowing that we do plan on making a series on this topic, I just want to get a full grasp of everything that's encompassed from start to finish. Start to finish, you'd rather have the full cake than half the cake. So knowing that, I will say that is why GPT in this context is so fundamental. Because everything I just described there, you can maybe get microbytes through the internet. And even then, when you get those microbytes, they're still fluff, still theoretical. Like, why do I want to go ahead and learn how to code out a function that basically it's a console log that says hello world? No. I want pragmatic stuff. Pragmatic stuff is what's going to give you value. and how you're going to make money in this context. So knowing that one of the most powerful tools you can use now is ChatGPT in this context, we do plan on giving more education on this topic with actual pragmatic stuff. But for now, that concludes today's video. So make sure to leave a like if you felt like you learned something today. I'm going to leave a playlist at the end here that basically is talks like these, and more recently talks of a artificial intelligence integrated SaaS, as this is a new industry coming up. We are only 10 months in. Years from now, people are going to look back and this is going to be a phase that occurs where you're going to enter the market now and be able to get a high return on the initial ROI of your work. So I encourage you to do it. I encourage you to get started and use ChatGPT as your educator. That $20 a month is going to be the cheapest $20 a month you've ever spent in your entire life if you know how to leverage it. So without further ado, I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for tuning in. And yes, surprise, I'm an AI avatar. Make sure to explore more here at Corbin AI, where we demystify AI for your personal and business life. Until next time.